It was just a few days ago that I did a video suggesting that President Trump had prematurely entered the lame duck part of his presidency, with all the various things like the election setback going against him, signs that the failures were fracturing the MAGA Republican base that had previously been so solidly in support. Well, that turned out to be something of an underestimate, and the vehicle, unsurprisingly, has been the Epstein files. And look, I'm not really interested in speculating what was in the Epstein files and how much will remain in them should they be published via the unreliable narrator that is Trump's Department of Justice. Without knowing any of that, we can say certain things for sure. One, President Trump, for whatever reason, really didn't want them to be released. At his behest, the House didn't meet over the last few weeks as they tried to prevent having to swear in the single Democratic lawmaker whose vote was going to swing the movement to force the release of the Epstein files. And then as that was running out of road, Trump lobbied Republican lawmakers not to vote for the motion. He pushed some of them one-to-one behind the scenes. He posted fiery all-caps posts on social media telling them not to do it, just to leave nothing to doubt. Then we had a series of capitulations that, for all the world, looked like a toddler trying to pull the wool over the adult's eyes, totally unaware that all of his tricks are hilariously transparent and puerile. First, he launched a social media broadside saying that he'd ordered his head of the DOJ, Pam Bondi, to initiate an investigation into all the big Democrat names who might be implicated by the Epstein files, which doesn't look at all like attempted deflection. Then, when it turned out that support amongst Republican congressmen was hemorrhaging, that they were likely to vote for the motion to release in big numbers, seeking a large enough majority to effectively be veto-proof, suddenly Trump decided to backtrack. Having fought against it tooth and nail, having dismissed it as a radical left lunatic Democrat hoax, having threatened Republicans not to go along with it or else, suddenly Trump changed his tune. Suddenly he announced that he was telling all of those Republicans to vote for the motion after all. We have nothing to hide, he said. Let's get it all out so we can move past it. Which might have been a credible thing to say, if that had been the first thing he'd said. It is hard to underestimate how astonishingly weak this has made Trump look, how much this has absolutely confirmed the onset of lame duckery. He ordered them not to do a thing. Large numbers of them decided to ignore him and do the thing. A massive rebellion. Not only did the lawmakers decide to do it, a large part of the base was cheering them on because they want the files released as well. And then when Trump realised he was about to be ignored en masse, he realised how impotent that would make him look, so he decided to demand that they do the thing he'd been telling them not to do, so that when they did it, he could claim, well, they only voted that way because he told them that they should. As though it's not completely obvious, hilariously, painfully obvious, that he completely and profoundly lost control of the narrative, of the party, and of many of his biggest supporters. Indeed, the act of demanding that Republicans vote for the motion to release the files is purely performative, because, of course, the president has the power to release all the files immediately, without anyone having to vote for anything. But no, he needs to neuter the perception that Republicans were going to vote against him. He has to turn it into a vote for him. That's the point. Way more than whatever is in the files. Chief amongst those supporters that he lost control of would be Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, having built her reputation, such as it is, on being more barking mad and more grossly offensive than anyone else in the service of Donald Trump, she started to realise it's all just toxic and horrible, and she has now publicly recanted. Trump had railed against her numerous times on social media over the last couple of days, labelling her as a traitor, and this, she reported, unsurprisingly, has led to death threats against her, which means she gets to join a very large and growing club. When CNN's Dana Bash pointed to her own similar rhetoric against other people in the past, She accepted the point, said that she had reconsidered her approach since the Charlie Kirk assassination. I would like to say, humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country. I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another, and we need to figure out a new path forward that is focused on the American people, because as Americans, no matter what side of the aisle we're on, we have far more in common than we have differences. Which is exactly the sort of language that gets the President of the United States calling you a traitor in this day and age. That, and talking about being concerned about the cost of living and slamming your own party over its stance on the rising cost of health insurance and the administration's failure to live up to its own America First principles, or obsessing on vanity projects like the new White House ballroom. Will this change of heart last? Who knows? The point is, she is now just the most visible and striking defection, and it has confirmed the point that Trump is increasingly now a lame duck. Because before, he ruled his party with an iron fist. Nobody with a lower couldn't give a damn score than, say, Senator Rand Paul, which means everybody except for Senator Rand Paul, dared to stand against him on just about anything. But in this case, they have, emboldened by the knowledge that Trump's own base was at odds with him on this, emboldened also by the poor showing in the recent election, and knowing that Trump's endorsement is no sure route to winning again in the future. And you're just starting to see this reflected in a new freedom in how people talk about some of the what used to be obvious questions that have been hovering around the magical thinking space. For example, the idea that Trump would find a way to serve a third term. So, for example, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy told CNN's Casey Hunt that while he didn't consider Trump to be a lame duck, in this instance, I think the Constitution is pretty clear that a president, whomever it might be, can only serve 2 terms. That's a statement of the obvious, but one that he and his peers were studiously avoiding commenting on until they saw just how different a new world they were actually living in. And note as well the disclaimer that Kennedy felt obliged to insist that he did not see the president as a lame duck. Such statements don't get made about presidents for whom there is no doubt whatsoever that they are at the height of their powers. So, what happens next? It will be intriguing to see if, while publicly saying that he wants the files released, it turns out there's some unfortunate eventuality that sadly prevents that from happening. If they are released, the DOJ has so discredited itself as being the tool of a president, likely none of the conspiracy theorists will believe it anyway, and for once they will have very good cause to be sceptical. The New York Times Magazine has a long and detailed piece today from interviews with 60 former officers of the Department of Justice, talking about how as soon as the Trump DOJ officials took their posts, well, it all started. Legitimate cases suddenly shut down for obviously political reasons. Political revenge cases, apparently without legal merit, suddenly insisted to be started. Leaders in the department refused to support meritless cases and resigned. Their deputies were demanded to do so instead. They resigned as well. One lawyer reported that out of the 110 of his peers who were in his branch at the point when Trump took office, 75 of them had left since. The few that remain were those that could kind of work with the patently political regime that had now arrived, or else are hanging on by their fingernails until confronted with a demand too far, in which case they were likely to follow. So yeah, we're going to take it on trust that department will release all files, including the parts that Trump is so keen not to have released. That when they do a huge release, if that actually happens at all, it won't just be a big sense of, is that it? So what was all the fuss about? Well, there's a bunch of people standing around with their fingers crossed behind their back. But it won't matter because Trump has already sustained the damage that has completely undermined his sense of power and invulnerability. The fact that he wanted this squashed and was left flapping around like a flounder on a fish hook has made him a laughingstock, certainly in Washington, certainly in Beijing. Don't get me started about Moscow. In the short term, expect Trump now to throw his energies into all sorts of projects that are anything but Epstein related. Lots of noise, lots of bombast, lots of rhetoric, tough guy talk. That may mean Venezuela. But then he comes up against the problem that attacking random countries illegally without congressional approval, the sort of thing he could just do until yesterday, that he's starting to lose support as well. As I've said before, it's not all going to disappear overnight. But boy, with this latest farce around turn, didn't this increase the pace with which Trump's aura of credibility is seeping out through the plug hole of history? The run-up to the midterm elections are going to be remarkably tense, and everything we feared was going to be true is going to have an encouragingly large question mark over it in the short term.